Many people say you fall in love with your first car. Well, I fell in love with my first computer, and my first computer was a Commodore Amiga. It was a fantastic machine, had all the latest games, had fantastic applications, but also underneath it all, it had one of the best operating systems I've ever used in my life. Now, the Amiga operating system was created with Carl Sassenrath, and the intuition was done by RJ Michael, and this is an absolute piece of art, and it was amazing. It was the only operating system I knew, and it really taught me all about stuff like devices, all about stuff like desktop publishing, 3D imagery, animation, and multitasking, which was kind of standard nowadays, but back then multitasking was a very impressive thing to see. Even if you use the Amiga operating system nowadays, you will be amazed with how light and how fast and how responsive it is. Now, I thought this was the future, and I did know nothing of Windows, I knew nothing of Mac, but sadly the Amiga went bankrupt just during its peak in kind of 1993-94. So we're going to look at the future of the operating system and where it led in this video, because they left thousands of users completely clueless about the future. Amiga users were left with an unupgraded operating system from Commodore. It was nice, but it needed work. So third-party companies came and created extra add-ons or versions that you could run yourself, and they were kind of good, but it was a bit of a stopgap solution. After a huge bidding war, Escom, a German PC retailer, ended up buying Commodore and the Amiga assets. Now, this was really interesting because they had retail stores, and we thought this could be a really good future for Amiga. You know, producing machines, manufacturing them, and selling them on the retail stores. But sadly, what they did was they started producing Amiga 1200s, and there was no upgrade to it, there was no CD-ROM, there was nothing like that, and they just tried to flog them. Now, you need to think at the time that these were being sold. These were being sold when the Voodoo PCI cards were really strong and powerful, and the Pentiums were coming in. Also, you had the N64 and you had the PlayStation, so selling this machine was kind of crazy. To be fair with Escom, they did a little idea, which was to build this kind of universally ridiculed Amiga Walker, which looked like a vacuum cleaner, and they did produce Amiga 4000 towers, which was nice to see. Sadly, it was all too little too late. You know, Amiga never really gained traction under Escom, and it all went tits up with the Escom PC division, leaving yet again the Amigans without an operating system or a machine. And then Gateway 2000 came along, another big PC retailer. Now, they got Amiga International with it, that kind of came with the package, came with the assets, and that also had Petro Tishchenko, who at the time was the president of Amiga and pretty much the only employee of Amiga. Now, Gateway promised a lot of stuff, but it'd really been going on a long time, and Petro was trying to get as much done as possible, but he was running on a really small budget, on a really outdated system. He did get some upgrades for the operating system, so OS 3.5 and 3.9 came out. Now, these were kind of nice upgrades, but they were really not needed. A machine was needed, or a future plan, or a future kind of architecture. A lot of the stuff that got onto OS 3.5 was basically add-ons that people had developed themselves, or other operating systems had developed, or stuff that was given away on cover discs. So most people were running OS 3.1 like 3.5. And the main thing we wanted was a new machine or a new architecture. Now PowerPC came out, so people started creating PowerPC cards, putting them inside their Amigas. Sad thing is, when I turned up to the show to get my PowerPC cards, Petro tried to sell me some Amiga Cola, Amiga mobile phones, and Amiga pants. This was really bad because we all had great hope for it. So we were greeted with an awful Amiga dance band that no one seemed to be into, and it was just really tragic. You know, there was an emerging Polish market that had a huge amount of people that were coming with wads of cash to buy these latest kind of accelerators and upgrade their computer, and they never really got delivered in time, and when they did, they were very overpriced, massively expensive. Gateway had their own plans, and they actually seemed quite realistic. They were going to drop the old architecture and go with a completely new machine called the Amiga MCC, and this was going to be in an ATX form. You know, it was going to be released as a new environment, operating environment, Amiga OE, and they had some quite nice concepts behind it. They had some quite good people behind it as well. Fleecy Moss, I remember he was a very good pro Amiga guy, and this was the machine that was promised. But yet again, Gateway went bankrupt, and the Amiga guys were left with no operating system or no new machine. And then things got weird. When I mean weird, I mean really weird.
And the sock puppet show. I certainly hope that the health plan covers mental health treatments for him. that will, you know, truly, Malcolm, get help. We love you.
I thought it was rather surreal. I've never seen a business presentation quite like that.
Yeah. Yes, it was very weird.
Yeah, it was rather like the whole thing, and sort of like the equipment breaking and stuff like that. It was rather comical effect.
It's still, you know, not enough people. You know, what happened in the world of Commodore? That's what I want to see. Right. Well, you know, even twice as many people would have made a difference. But you know, we didn't make anything at the show. We made a couple of web orders that had nothing to do with the show that paid for the cost of doing this. Right. But after paying for 5 different hotel rooms and paying for the booth and everything else, every show we do is a loss. Last year we had an $80,000 loss for me.
So 13 years after Commodore's demise, a new machine was created, and this was the Pegasus. Now the Pegasus machines were awesome. They were basically based on PowerPC, just like those chips that you saw earlier that would go inside people's original Amigas. But the difference with this was that it wouldn't be able to access the original hardware unless you had it in the original Amiga, so that would be emulated. The key is it had new components on it. It had FireWire, it had Ethernet ports, it also had MIDI ports, support for DVD drives. This was great, as it meant you can use other operating systems like Linux on there and QNX. This really opened up the world for a new kind of vision of Amiga. Whilst this was going on as well, there was demos of OS4 coming out, so people started to see a future. The operating system behind this, Morphos, was an absolute piece of art. You know, it was compatible on the Amiga API, but it also supported extra things like PowerUp and Warpos formats, which were kind of external formats that were created for those cards that you saw earlier, so that you could run 3D graphics, you could run rendering, you could run all extra stuff and actually use the power of the full machine.
Mr. Carter, where did the idea to develop this new computer originate?
The basic idea was to give the Amiga market a new innovative hardware, to make the performance of the PowerPC available to the user.
How fast is the new computer, for example, compared to the power-up cards?
We have a major performance increase due to the new processors, the G3, G4 and G4 Plus, so that the new system will be 10 to 20 times as fast.
And how compatible is the new system in regards of old software? For instance, will AGA software work and will it be able to boot from old Amiga disks?
Of course, one can only run AGA software by using emulation, which means it will be quite slow. The basic concept is to use programs which run on original Amigas equipped with graphics cards.
Now, I was a huge fan of the Amiga OS, and OS4 for me was the operating system that I really wanted to see. But we kept hearing about prototypes, we kept hearing about releases, and nothing happened. It started to kind of feel stagnant.
We started out being a games company interested in doing just games, but as time progressed, it became very much apparent that Amiga was relying on us to do a lot more than just doing games. We would then have to do 3D technology, Warp 3D drivers and so forth. We are now doing also Radeon, Voodoo 3 drivers and Permedia 2 and 3. And as a result, we more and more got sucked into actually doing the technology rather than just the content for the technology. But it's a chicken and egg situation. If there is no technology, we cannot make the content. And without that, we don't have a business. So we first need to have the technology, and nobody else was really going to do it or could do it in this time frame. So we needed to do it ourselves.
Now this was the start of the great red versus blue war of Amiga, and I'm going to cover that in a separate video because it was such a horrible time. So many developers left, and it just deserves a video of its own.
Entschuldigung, kurze Frage. Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Amiga OS 4.
Kurze Frage. Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Morphos.
Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
OS 4.
Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Also OS 4 hat man ja noch nicht mehr so viel gehört, ne? In letzter Zeit. Also eher Morphos.
Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Amiga OS 4.
Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Morphos mittlerweile, muss ich sagen. Also weil bei Amiga OS, man sieht ja nichts davon. Amiga ist nicht hier. Und Morphos haben wir eine Plattform, vor allem die neue Hardware. Der Amiga One, ja, Prototypen haben wir auch noch nicht davon gesehen. Schauen wir mal.
Ich darf das Interview mal kurz unterbrechen. Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Da würde ich Amiga OS 4 vorziehen, weil ich mit Amiga OS 3.9 gute Erfahrungen gemacht habe und gerne in dieser Linie weitermachen würde.
Und wie sieht's hier aus? Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Weder noch. Abwarten.
Abwarten.
Classic bleiben, PCI aufrüsten und dann schauen wir mal.
Ganz kurze Frage. Amiga OS 4 oder Morphos?
Amigas OS 4.
It's now 17 years later, and what can I say? Amiga OS 4 has been delivered. It's really good. It's supported on multiple machines now, including new Amiga hardware like the X5000s, the SAM460, which is very impressive to see. But also sitting alongside it is Morphos. They are now both on the same machine, which I find absolutely fantastic. But Morphos has also added support for all those classic Macs using PowerPC, so they've got a whole new library of new stuff. And I was wondering, you know, the Wii, that's PowerPC, isn't it? Maybe one day we'll see Morphos on the Wii. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you Morphos, show you what you can do in 2019 with it, so you can yet again pose that question: is this the future of Amiga? So I am running OS 3.11 on my Power Mac G5, and I am running the latest version of Morphos, and it's very nice. As you can see, there's a lot of legacy stuff here. So that is Shell working, and that's the kind of original Amiga shell, and this is the registry tool. So if you want to buy Morphos, which I suggest doing, then register it using this tool. And you know, there's different prices for different machines, but you can also run it for free. So you can run it for 20 minutes without any timeout or anything like that. This is kind of an example of the fancy effects. So this is called Lucy, and Lucy enables transparent windows. So you can kind of turn it on or off. I tend to leave it off because I'm not such a fan of fancy effects. But there's some amazing stuff inside the OS that people don't really talk about. So this is the disk image controller, and what you can do with this is you can select an ADF file, any ADF file, and straight away it will just appear on your desktop. It will like mount it automatically, which is fantastic because, you know, you can get 15 disks on there. So if you've got something that's a huge install, all the floppy disks are in the same place, so you can just click on it like this and just get straight into your old original legacy programs, which is great. Now Morphos also supports modern stuff, so it supports legacy, but it's gotta hit the not hit the hardware. So you'll see what I mean in a minute. Now this is Grunch. Grunch is a great application. Basically finds all the versions on your hard drive and then tells you if you have outdated version of the software, lets you update it from within the actual app. It's kind of like the App Store for Morphos, which is just really fantastic and very useful. And this is an example of legacy stuff. So this is Dopus, Directory Opus, which is an original Amiga program, but it didn't hit the hardware. It didn't need certain things in the AGA chip, and we do that with emulation. So as you can see, there's no dragging and dropping. You can switch between the programs, which is good, but emulation is actually integrated into Morphos, but you have to do it yourself, which I find rather frustrating. I've got this pack called the Crysalis Pack, and I suggest everybody downloads it because it already sets up your emulators in a nice folder like this, but you still have to do a bit of work yourself. I'm going to leave a link to an article in Obligement magazine, which is the French Amiga magazine, and you need to probably translate it, but that will show you how to do this run in UAE on Morphos. And this is the kind of setup that I've got, pointing to where the ROM is, telling it about the specs and the screen size. And the way that I've set this up is, it's pretty cool. You can do it with like custom tool types and stuff like that, but there's these options to run it in EUAE. Now you can also have a hard drive file that loads up in the background, and then you have an installation of 3.1 running, and it acts as kind of a gateway between it. So you can have iGame running on Morphos, and then that will open the game in UAE quickly. Now I've got the options of a 500 or a 1200 setup here, but also I just have it set so I double click the ADF and straight away the game loads, which is really, really useful actually, because if you think about trying to set up stuff, and if you haven't got Amiga Forever or something like this, then it's kind of frustrating. And if someone just sends you an ADF, you can just chuck it on your Morphos machine, double click it, and just go straight into it. And I can't wait to get the applications working with this. I will surely do a video on that. But here's Lemmings as well, and you can see there's a little bit of screen tearing on this, but you know, it does run really well. And this is mainly on the kind of introductions and stuff, like when you're playing with the sprites and stuff, it just works like a nice emulator, and it is kind of seamless. You have options to speed up the floppy controllers as well and stuff, and display the LED, but I really don't like to display all the LEDs, because then you kind of guess that you're an emulator. So I like to pretend that it's all beautifully integrated, and it is if you configure it correctly, which is always the kind of thing with these Amigas. It always takes long to set them up. Now this is the file transfer program protocol, FTP, which is really good because I'm on the EAB FTP here. I can straight away download any applications and just launch them, or get compatible applications with it, and if not, use them within an emulator. Now there's some cool little stuff as well, like the video features. Now the video, it should be able to play 720p quite nicely, and it's actually quite hard for the Mac operating system like Tiger to play that, but it's really nice for video. As you can see, it's just great. And there was a few glitches, but that's due to my capture. Now if you were going to play something in like MKV or a 1080p file, you may struggle, as you can see. Now there's a lot of music options you need to think about, and this is AmiNet Radio, and the cool thing about AmiNet Radio is it supports mods, and I absolutely love playing my mods through stuff, but also it supports MP3 WAV, and it supports HTTP radio stations, so you can kind of connect directly to a stream or a server. And I'm just going to connect here to a Cheesy Gem Radio, and let's see if Dan Wood's on air. Yeah, that's probably Dan. I've also got SceneSat, which is one of your old kind of demo scene programs, and you can make this really small and just have it as a nice little radio player. This is Twitter, which is pretty amazing. I've just been playing around with the MUI because at the moment my name seems to highlight in yellow, which is strange and it's a bit unreadable, but I can tweet directly from my machine, and I think that's pretty awesome that Twitter is supported, Twittermiga, but as you can see I'm highlighting here the yellow ones, and I'm sure if you know a solution, just post it in the comments, that would be awesome. But let's look at the browser. It works really well on here. So first you've got to spoof your browser as Firefox, and then let's go on a quite heavy demanding site, which is the BBC, and as you can see it's loading quite well considering it's an old machine, but it also supports HTML5. Now this is really important and really cool, because HTML5 is becoming the standard now for the web stuff. So the BBC's looking great. I don't think you'll be able to play any content on there, but this is my podcast site, and straight away.
On this week's show, why Super Mario Maker has been needed since the 80s.
Our N64 and GameCube games coming to the Switch.
And we get the untold story of the dawn of cyberculture and online gaming. We talk Plato with Brian Deere. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 181, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
And me, Joe Fox.
Now, Ravi's still on his travels this week.
Okay, so let's see some examples of how powerful this is, because, you know, a lot of Amiga browsers have crashed between stuff, and I don't know what it is with this version of OWB. I don't know if it's better than the version on OS 4, but this one does seem to be quite stable. So we're just going to load up a couple of examples of HTML5 Canvas, which is the kind of the new place that everybody's creating all these amazing stuff. And also I think FriendOS works on it as well. I did try FriendUp at one point on it, but we'll just give this a second to load. And that's pretty cool that that's done in HTML5, and we've got two open at the moment. This is a cloth simulator and it's slightly laggy there, but if we turn the other one off, I'm sure that you'll see it speed up. There you go. Yeah. And that is really responsive and great, actually, because video and everything is going to start to turn into HTML5. Now, talking of video, there's something that everybody wants on Amiga, and that is YouTube, and they always want to see YouTube working. Now, there is a little HTML5 converter, and it's really good, actually. It plays it at a decent rate, not full screen, but in a small window. So let's check out Mr. Dan Wood here. And it's converted to HTML5.
With another Amiga-related video today. I know you always look forward to these ones. And today as well is going to be quite special because in this video, I'm going to recreate my first ever Amiga experience.
So at that kind of size, it's quite smooth.
That I received for Christmas 1991. Now, if you only care about the unboxing and you want to just check out the hardware, skip to this timecode here because I know some people like, have an attention span of a goldfish on YouTube. For everybody else, I want to tell you...
So it's quite comfortable watching YouTube videos, and remember you can also download them, but I'm glad that you're able to do it this way, and it is kind of crazy, like the interface, because it does mess it up a bit, but there is a new script that you can download.
I bought these 18 Xbox Ones
you see,
to
it's not
see
that
if
bad
I can fix
loading
them
it up.
and if I can make money. Let's get started. Now the total buy cost on all 18 of these units is one.
So we've got audio working from the internet, we've got video working from the internet, we've got Amiga integration, we've got a PDF reader here as well, which is pretty much an essential nowadays. You need to be able to check out your PDFs and any documents that you're getting sent, and do it securely as well. And now we're going to look at audio on the Amiga, and the first thing, of course, you need a tracker. So there is lots of support for trackers. Milky Tracker, there's Hy-Vee Tracker. I'm sure you can use Octamed with a change library. There's ways to run Pro Tracker as well. So you've kind of got all your tracker stuff sorted there natively. But if you want sequencers, then I think there's one called Samplitude Opus as well, and these are quite nice because you can build up big tunes and complex stuff, and I'm sure you can use them in higher bit rates as well, so you can get better quality audio out of there, even though I'm a good old tracker fan, as you know. But this is a really nice little program, Audio Evolution, and if you have projects in that, then yeah, you can get some nice output. We don't edit the podcast in this. Now, the next thing which Amiga's always struggled with has been Office. Now, I know there's a lot of people running WordWorth 7 and Final Writer 97 on it, but and there's a new word processor, and this word processor is called Cinnamon Writer. And the nice thing about Cinnamon is that you can save in docx, and it kind of supports newer formats, which is nice. It's not really a hugely powerful kind of desktop publishing piece, as maybe WordWorth would have a lot more desktop publishing options. But next we're going to look at graphics, and this is Candy Factory. And if you remember this was an awesome piece of software. It was just absolutely beautiful. You could do custom fonts, you could change these images, and look at that. I remember all this old school stuff and all the old effects, and this is actually the original Amiga version. No changes needed. You just install Candy Factory Pro and go ahead. Look at that. That is absolutely beautiful. And a lot of these programs were really, really powerful back then as well. So if you're really into your kind of old school aesthetic, then I'd give Morphos a go. But it also supports very powerful rendering platforms. So Lightwave was one, and Cinema 4D is another here. And I don't know what I am doing on these at all. I can just about open an example of something. But these are really good, and I'm sure with the extra CPU and the extra RAM, it really does speed up stuff. So even if you had some original Cinema 4D files, or you had some original Lightwave files, you might be able to render them into a higher resolution or something like that. So I think this is really useful for people that do all that 3D stuff or the ray tracing. Now, this program, TV Paint, is a 24-bit graphics editor, and actually it's amazing. I went round to see a guy who was working in a TV studio recently, and they had a new version of TV Paint, and they were doing a lot of animation on that. It wasn't this version, but this is the original, and it works really well. You can select, 1080p screens and edit in that, which is just awesome, especially with TV Paint, because it has loads of cool tools. And this is Blender now. Blender is a very modern kind of renderer and builder, but also what you can do in Blender is you can edit video, which is really cool. And this is kind of showing the more Linuxy side of stuff and the programs, because you get a bit of compatibility from the Linux programs as well as the kind of software from Amiga and the older legacy stuff. Thanks so much for watching this first in the series of Amiga the Next Generation, and I'm going to be looking into a lot of the other operating systems, the other hardware, the promises that we got failed, and of course the madness. So thanks so much. Please give a like and a comment. Ciao.